For years, many Americans have lived, worked, and traveled abroad without issue. However, in 2025, several countries are making it increasingly difficult or even outright impossible for Americans to stay. From diplomatic tensions to strict new laws, some nations have ramped up efforts to detain, deport, or block entry for U.S. citizens. In some cases, American expats are being pressured to leave, while others are outright barred from returning. Today, we're counting down the 10 countries where Americans are being forced to leave or avoid entirely. Before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe, like, and hit the notification bell so you never miss out on more engaging content. Let's get started. Number 10. Myanmar, Burma. The political turmoil following the 2021 military coup in Myanmar has led to the detention of foreign nationals, including Americans, often on vague charges. The U.S. government has issued advisories against travel to the region due to the risk of arbitrary enforcement of local laws. Since the military seized power, Myanmar has become increasingly dangerous for foreign nationals, especially Americans. The U.S. Department of State has issued a Level 4 travel advisory, warning citizens to avoid the region. Several American citizens have been detained on vague charges, with authorities using national security laws as a pretext for imprisonment. In some cases, foreigners have been arrested simply for criticizing the government online or associating with pro-democracy activists. Myanmar's military regime has also been known to use detained foreigners as bargaining chips in diplomatic negotiations, making it extremely risky for Americans to remain in the country. With an unpredictable legal system, even minor infractions such as overstaying a visa can lead to prolonged imprisonment. Human rights organizations have raised concerns over the treatment of foreign detainees, with reports of harsh prison conditions and restricted communication. Many American expats have already left Myanmar, with the U.S. Embassy urging citizens to depart as soon as possible. If tensions continue to escalate, Myanmar could soon become completely off-limits for American travelers and residents. Number 9. Cuba. Although relations between the U.S. and Cuba have fluctuated over the years, there have been instances where American citizens faced arbitrary detention or travel restrictions, especially those engaging in activities deemed sensitive by the Cuban government. Cuba has long had a complicated relationship with the U.S., and recent political developments have made it even more difficult for Americans to stay in the country. In the past, Americans living or traveling in Cuba have faced sudden visa cancellations, arrests, or restricted movement, particularly those involved in journalism, activism, or business dealings that the government views as politically sensitive. Diplomatic relations between the U.S. and Cuba have shifted over time, but American citizens still face the risk of arbitrary detention and harassment by Cuban authorities. In some cases, visitors have been detained for simply possessing U.S. government-related materials or engaging in humanitarian aid work. The Cuban government has also tightened visa regulations, making it harder for U.S. nationals to enter and stay legally. Since 2024, Cuba has increased surveillance on foreign nationals, particularly Americans, leading to concerns that visitors could be detained for minor infractions or used as leverage in political disputes. With relations between the U.S. and Cuba deteriorating once again, Americans are being advised to limit travel or consider leaving altogether. If the situation worsens, Cuba may soon become one of the least accessible countries for U.S. citizens. Number 8. Egypt. The Egyptian government has occasionally detained foreign nationals, including Americans, particularly those involved in activism or journalism, citing national security concerns. These incidents have prompted travel advisories and diplomatic interventions. Egypt is a popular tourist destination, but for American expats and journalists, the country is becoming increasingly hostile. The Egyptian government has a history of detaining foreign nationals under national security laws, particularly those involved in activism, investigative reporting, or human rights advocacy. Americans have been arrested on suspicion of espionage, often without clear evidence, and some have been held in detention for months without trial. This has led to frequent diplomatic interventions from the U.S. government. In recent years, the Egyptian government has also cracked down on foreign NGOs and humanitarian workers, forcing many American expats to leave due to restrictions on their activities. The U.S. State Department has issued heightened travel advisories, warning Americans about the risk of arbitrary detention and restricted legal protections. Additionally, visa policies have become stricter, with some Americans reporting difficulties obtaining or renewing their residency permits. For many U.S. citizens living in Egypt, the growing risk of detainment and deportation is making it an unsafe place to stay. Number 7. Turkey. In the aftermath of the 2016 coup attempt, Turkey detained several foreign nationals, including Americans, on charges of terrorism or espionage, often with limited evidence. These actions have led to diplomatic tensions and warnings for travelers. Turkey has been a key U.S. ally in the past, but in recent years, relations have soured, increasing risks for American travelers and residents. Since the failed coup attempt in 2016, Turkey has arrested multiple foreign nationals, including Americans, under vague accusations of espionage or involvement in anti-government activities. One high-profile case was that of Andrew Brunson, an American pastor detained for over 2 years on dubious terrorism charges, sparking a diplomatic crisis between Turkey and the U.S. While many American expats live in Turkey without issues, arbitrary detentions remain a concern, particularly for those involved in politics, journalism, or religious work. The Turkish government has also introduced stricter visa regulations, making it more difficult for American nationals to stay long-term without facing bureaucratic hurdles. The U.S. government has repeatedly warned citizens about the risks of travel to Turkey, and many American residents have opted to leave due to safety concerns. With political tensions continuing to rise, Turkey is becoming an increasingly dangerous place for U.S. citizens to live or visit. Number 6. Russia. Following heightened tensions between the U.S. and Russia, American citizens have been increasingly targeted by Russian authorities. Several U.S. nationals have been detained on espionage charges, often with little evidence. Since the invasion of Ukraine in 2022, Russia has cracked down on foreign nationals, particularly Americans. The Russian government has accused multiple U.S. citizens of spying, leading to long prison sentences under harsh conditions. High-profile cases, such as journalist Evan Gershkovich's arrest, have only intensified concerns about the safety of Americans in Russia. Additionally, Russia has banned certain American organizations and media outlets, and citizens affiliated with these groups risk detention or deportation. In 2024, the Russian government implemented stricter entry and residency requirements for Americans, making it even harder for them to live and work in the country. With tensions between Russia and the U.S. at an all-time high, the State Department has issued a Level 4 travel advisory, urging all Americans to leave Russia immediately. Those who remain risk becoming political pawns in an escalating diplomatic conflict. Number 5. China. China has intensified its restrictions on foreign nationals, particularly Americans, as relations with the U.S. continue to deteriorate. Reports of exit bans, arbitrary detentions, and heightened surveillance have made the country increasingly dangerous for U.S. citizens. In recent years, China has enacted strict counter-espionage laws, which have been used to detain foreigners, including Americans, on vague national security charges. Some U.S. citizens have been prevented from leaving the country under exit bans, often as leverage in political or business disputes. Business professionals and journalists have reported increased surveillance, restricted access to certain areas, and difficulties obtaining or renewing visas. The U.S. government has warned that Americans traveling to China could be at risk of arbitrary detention, especially those involved in sectors deemed sensitive by the Chinese government. Amid growing tensions over trade, technology, and military affairs, China has become one of the riskiest destinations for Americans. Many U.S. expatriates are leaving, fearing they could be caught up in political retaliation. Number 4. North Korea. North Korea has long been off-limits to American citizens, and the U.S. government has banned travel to the country due to extreme risks. Those who enter illegally or without authorization face immediate detention and harsh prison sentences. For years, North Korea has used foreign detainees, especially Americans, as bargaining chips in negotiations with the U.S. High-profile cases, such as Otto Warmbier, have shown the brutal consequences of being detained in the reclusive state. The North Korean government has issued strong warnings against American visitors, and those caught entering the country through unofficial means face severe punishment, including forced labor and lengthy prison sentences. Due to the dangers involved, the U.S. government has completely prohibited its citizens from traveling to North Korea. Those who violate this ban face legal consequences upon their return to the U.S. and the likelihood of being abandoned in a hostile regime should they be caught. Number 3. Iran. Iran has a history of detaining American citizens on charges of espionage, often using them as leverage in negotiations with the U.S. Tensions between the two nations make it extremely dangerous for Americans to live or travel there. Iranian authorities have arrested multiple Americans on accusations of spying, many of whom were later used in prisoner exchanges. The Iranian government does not recognize dual nationality, meaning Iranian Americans who visit could be treated as Iranian citizens under local law and denied U.S. consular assistance. Recent crackdowns on dissent and increasing hostility toward Western nations have made Iran even riskier for U.S. citizens. Arbitrary detentions, exit bans, and state surveillance have prompted the U.S. government to strongly warn against any travel to the country. Americans in Iran face significant risks of imprisonment, and many have been forced to leave in recent years to avoid becoming political pawns in a worsening diplomatic standoff. Number 2. Afghanistan. Since the Taliban regained control of Afghanistan in 2021, the country has become highly dangerous for Americans. The U.S. Embassy in Kabul remains closed, and those who remain are at extreme risk of detention or violence. The Taliban government does not have diplomatic relations with the U.S., meaning Americans trapped in Afghanistan have little hope of legal protection. Reports of foreigners being arrested, kidnapped, or executed have made it clear that Afghanistan is not a safe place for U.S. citizens. Foreign aid workers and journalists have faced severe restrictions, and Americans who previously worked with the U.S. military or government are particularly at risk. The Taliban has cracked down on any Western influence, and those found in violation of its strict laws could face life-threatening consequences. Due to the extreme risks, the U.S. government has repeatedly urged all American citizens to leave Afghanistan immediately. Number 1. Venezuela. Political instability and anti-American sentiment in Venezuela have made it the most dangerous country for U.S. citizens. The Venezuelan government has detained several Americans, accusing them of espionage or conspiracy against the state. Since the political crisis escalated in recent years, American businesses and diplomats have been expelled, and individuals traveling on U.S. passports have been subjected to harassment, detainment, or outright denial of entry. Venezuela has also used detained Americans as political bargaining chips in negotiations with Washington. Reports of poor prison conditions, lack of due process, and state-sponsored surveillance have raised serious concerns about the safety of Americans in the country. With diplomatic relations between the U.S. and Venezuela at a low point, Americans still in the country are being urged to leave before the situation worsens. Final thoughts. As tensions rise across the world, more countries are making it harder for Americans to live, work, or travel freely. From political crackdowns to outright bans, the risks are increasing for U.S. citizens abroad. If you're an American traveler or expat, always stay informed and aware of changing visa policies, security threats, and diplomatic relations. The last thing you want is to find yourself trapped in a foreign country with no way out. Which country on this list surprised you the most? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more eye-opening content. Stay safe, and we'll see you in the next video.